In this video, we're talking about inspiration and the appendix in. So my pal Kyle and his pal John have an amazing podcast called The Splat Book. And recently they did an episode all about the appendix in, and they listed their own version of their appendix in, all the stuff that inspires them when they're getting ready to play a tabletop role-playing game. And I love this episode so much, I thought it would be fun to do my own version, share some of the things I find inspiring, and give a little look into how I approach telling stories and running TTRPGs and hopefully inspire you as well. So I'm going to have a link to the Splatbook podcast and that episode down in the description, as well as everything I'm talking about in this video. Go check out all the awesome stuff down in the description. Okay, so I keep saying appendix in. What does that mean? So in the original Dungeon Master's Guide, which was just a collection of stuff, it wasn't really advice or too many rules, and I don't know, it's a weird book. But there was this appendix in, and it's just a list of things that the authors of Dungeons and Dragons found inspiring, things that influenced them in creating this game. And I think this is actually a really helpful resource with anything. So like, if you're thinking about running a new game and you tell your players, okay, this is going to be inspired by Dark Souls and Star Wars, or whatever, that's going to give your players a really clear idea of what they can expect playing in your game. And it also gives you a really nice framework or lens of looking at your game in terms of coming up with ideas. Okay, so my appendix in, I'm going to start with the thing that kind of got me into playing tabletop role-playing games and also gave me the confidence to write my own adventures. And that is Servants of the Cinder Queen by Jason Lutz, illustrated by Kenny. I don't know how to say his last name properly, but amazing artist. All the art in this is fantastic. Go follow them. Link down in the description. So back when I was in grad school, it's the same time that Gary Gygax passed away, and one of my professors, Jason Lutz, decided to run an old game of AD&D, I think it was, and he used one of Gary Gygax's adventure. I can't remember if it's like the Frost Giant one, something Frost Giant Mountain. I can't remember the specific adventure, but a bunch of the students got together. We rolled up characters. I ended up being an elf with some sort of frost magic that did absolutely nothing against these frost giants. But regardless, it was an amazing time. I had so much fun playing, and that set me down the path to having fun with D&D and tabletop role-playing games. So Jason did a Kickstarter for this Servants of the Cinder Queen book, and this isn't actually a D&D book, it's a dungeon world adventure, and it's basically just a wonderful starting adventure. There's a town in peril, there's cultists under the mountain digging for something, and the heroes have to go in and save the day before the Cinder Queen is unleashed upon this world. So let's see, how many pages is this? Okay, it's only 24 pages, and what I love about this little zine is that it is a complete adventure, but it's not this big, overwhelming hardcover book, like one of these campaign huge books. It's everything you need right there. The text is all straightforward but evocative. All of the illustrations complement the text and really make it this very clear, wonderful little adventure. So yeah, obviously this was a huge inspiration to Dragontown, not necessarily in tone, but just as like a confidence boost, like I felt like I could do this stuff too. I could sit down and run this adventure, and I could also write an adventure like this. So definitely check out Servants of the Cinder Queen, especially if you run Dungeon World. Okay, next up, talking about writing and confidence, and I guess cartoonists, because both Jason and Kenny are cartoonists. I'm holding up What It Is by Linda Berry, but she has a few of these amazing collage comic instructional booklets. This one is my favorite. I think it's the first one, and it's all about why we write, why we create. There's exercise to help get you writing in this book. It's also like a personal journal. It's just a really amazing book about creativity. And while this has nothing to do with tabletop role-playing games or fantasy, it does really get at why we use our imaginations, and it presents those ideas in a really wonderful, inspiring way. And this is just a lovely book. Everything that Linda Berry does is so full of heart and charm. But if you want to be inspired and you want to get in touch with your childlike imagination, definitely check out what it is. Okay, while we're on the topic of books, so I got introduced to Dungeons and Dragons through the Dragonlance novels when I was a little kid. The story of that group of adventures totally captured my imagination, and I was obsessed with Raceland and Tanis and Sturm and all that stuff. I just loved it. As I got a little older, I was sidetracked into the world of comics. So I feel like I'm not the most well-read of the fantasy genre. I've read some Wheel of Time and Earthsea stuff, and I've read Lord of the Rings. I'm definitely not as well-read in that world as I would like. However, these two books by Zach Gorman, who is another cartoonist, but these are prose fantasy books for younger readers, illustrated by Sam Bosma, who has a wonderful series called Fantasy Sports that is definitely worth checking out. But these books are very special. Thisbe the Stoop and the Black Mountain is the first one, and Thisbe the Stoop and the Wretched Scrattle is the second one. It's a real shame that there is not a third book, but basically this is the story of a dungeon gameskeeper. Like Thisbe lives down in this dungeon underneath the Black Mountain, and she takes care of all of the creatures that everybody thinks are these horrible monsters and stuff. And the further you go down in the dungeon, the more dangerous it gets. Wonderful fantasy story. It kind of turns the princess in danger idea on its head, which I love that kind of stuff. Thisbe has a little ooze friend that is, ends up being super important to the story. And the thing that I really love about these two books is, Thisbe doesn't have a sword, and she solves all of these typical sort of D&D encounters with monsters by using her brain, and I just love it. It's that kind of story, but it's told through a different sort of lens, and that's something that I always try to bring to all of my D&D games, all of the adventures I write for tabletop RPGs. Taking the typical fantasy stuff and flipping it just a little bit to make it fun and interesting. And yeah, Thisbe is just such a lovely character, a role model of sorts. And don't let this young reader thing get in the way. I mean, obviously, as I sit here with all this stuff behind me, I love kids stuff. And maybe like this is like Dark Souls or Elden Ring for kids, which sounds totally weird, but now that I'm thinking about it, it is totally awesome. They're quick reads. Definitely check out the two Thisbe the Stoop books. Okay, next up, I'm holding up my Goonies box set because I think Goonies is probably the best Dungeons and Dragons movie ever made. But I'm not actually going to talk about the Goonies. I want to talk about the Neverending Story, which is from around the same time, or at least when I was a kid, I was watching these two movies around the same time. Again, the Neverending Story, you have this fantasy adventure. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on. There's the snail riders, and the Nothing is this big evil darkness, maybe similar to the Darkness Below in my Dragontown campaign. That might have been where I got that idea from. Just like with Thisbe, the thing I love about the Neverending Story is it's about being a hero, but it's not necessarily about, you know, swinging a sword and killing monsters, which, you know, I love D&D stuff. I think that's totally fun, and I love rolling dice and getting big numbers and killing lots of enemies. I think that's totally fun. But the things that inspire me and really get my imagination going when I was a kid and also lately are, I think these things that aren't all about violence. It's about being heroic in other ways. And, you know, the saddest scene in any movie ever when Artax is drowning in the swamp of sorrow. It's like the saddest thing ever, but you have to keep going, and being a hero means keep going and overcoming the sorrow and the nothingness. And it's just it's so wonderful, and I love it so much. If you've never seen the Neverending Story, definitely go watch it. And if it's been a while, watch it again. It's got so much great stuff in it. The ending's a little quick and weird, but it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay, if I haven't aged myself enough yet, back when I was a young lad, all of my friends were completely obsessed with Final Fantasy VII. It was the most mind-blowing video game that had ever existed. And while everybody was playing Final Fantasy VII, I was playing the Suikoden games. These are pixel art JRPG games for the PlayStation, the original PlayStation. And these games really, really, I think, hold up because the pixel art is from that time when it was just like they had figured out pixel art. It just everything looks really good. The music is amazing. The story. The reason I'm sharing these is because the story in these games are about these sort of like epic wars that are going on. If I'm thinking about running like a big epic campaign at the D&D table, it would be in the vein of these Suikoden games. In each game, you play as a different hero that kind of gets sucked into this war, and you have to become a leader. And you know, like all JRPGs, you start weak and you level up and you get stronger. Like all D&D games, you know, you get more involved in this war to the point where you're deciding the outcome of it. But you are also traveling around this fantasy world, recruiting up to 108 stars of destiny in these games. You recruit all these characters, and you know each one is different and unique. All these amazing NPCs. You know, in the first game they have these kobolds, they're like the dog kobolds, and the dragon riders. And in the second game there's these little squirrel people that are so wonderful, and there's ninjas and stuff. There's a wonderful B or C plot. I mean, there's all kind. You know, each character has their own like story stuff going on. Like all 108 characters have their own stories happening all at once, and how you get involved. But there's this wonderful enemy called Necklord. He's like vampire. He's like Dracula, super evil kind of side quest thing in both of the games. I wasn't going to put these games on this list because they're kind of hard to get. They're actually very difficult to find now. But Konami just said just showed off this new HD remaster, and now is the time. Now is the time to play these first two Suikoden games. These are definitely like in my top 10 games of all time. You know, I know I talk about Dragon Quest all of the time on this channel. If those games, are visually inspiring, the stories are good, the combat and the games are good, but Suikoden takes all of that stuff to the next level. I love these games with all of my heart. Okay, so that's my list. Let me know down in the comments, what is your appendix in? What are the things that inspire your tabletop RPGs? I would love to hear suggestions from all of you down in the comments. If you like this video, let me know, because I feel like I could do another one very easily, another 2 or 3 very easily, suggestions of inspiring stuff. If you love some of the things that I suggested, I would recommend you check out my Patreon, where every month I make new tabletop role-playing game adventures or games or fun resources that are inspired by these things. I'm very proud of all the work that I do over there, and the support means a lot to me. It means the world. So check out the Patreon. It's also linked down in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!